Thank you. Thank you, Brianna. Thank you for those inspiring words, President Wagner. And I'm honored by our honorees, many of whom have chosen to find an elevated sense of purpose and at this point in their journeys, which is inspiring. I do have one note to our friend Dooley. Students may come and go, but apparently they may also come back one day as Class Day speakers. So Brianna's words are only mildly overstated, but still very much appreciated. I congratulate this class of 15. I understand it is to whom it is to your credit or otherwise that I have been asked to stand before you, that you have unanimously voted and you found somebody you truly wanted, and since they couldn't come, I'm here. First, just a disclaimer. I'm not a speaker. I have a day job. I sell stuff, sometimes more than others, in lots of places, in different colors, different sizes. But I know that this process, as I stand before you, that you're going to sit in judgment of it because that's what you do. And that's okay. But I just ask that if you're going to judge me, I want to share an adage with you, which is a favorite of mine, and that is that before you judge somebody, you should walk a mile in their shoes, preferably mine. And then, if you don't like them, you're a mile away and you have their shoes. So I did graduate, full disclosure, I did graduate from Emory, I can't deny it. It's come to be part of what defines me, and I've learned to embrace that. I guess a 12-step program is the first step is to acknowledge. And I think it was 7 or 8 years ago, I think. But what I did was I posted a photograph of that event this morning on my Instagram page and also on Twitter. Evidence to some that, in fact, I do have an education. And or either that or hashtag shameless self-promotion. But I would appreciate it if you would acknowledge it. I have relatively low self-esteem, and if you would just acknowledge that, friend it, like it, retweet it, any of the above is acceptable. So I was here at Emory, as I said a few years ago, and I took easy classes, and I got okay grades. I drank beer, and I confess I even smoked pot, and it was medicinal purposes. And I unintentionally probably learned a lot more than I intended to. It was an experience that has stayed with me, and I loved the great weekends and the wonderful Wednesdays. You do need to know, though, that I find it rather amusing that on Monday, you will be walking across the same quad, sitting in the same chairs, wearing the same shapeless gowns, unflattering shapeless gowns, and flat, square hats to put on your round heads, with a tassel nonetheless, And the only thing that will distinguish each of you from each other will be in your choice of footwear. Aha. That is why I am the chosen one. I'm slow, but I get it eventually. So, class of 15, I tore up my speech actually this morning because I've been struggling with what to say to you, and I started to think of a bigger contextual world, and it's unsettling. And I also have been made aware of your individual and collective passion for social justice, which inspires me. But it's very unsettling. So many of our cities are erupting and our infrastructure is crumbling, and which offer significant challenges as you enter this new world, as you end one chapter and begin another. But it also presents conceivably extraordinary opportunities. And I think you're ready. But before I address you, I will tell you how I got from being in your shoes to mine, literally. It was in the early 80s, and I wanted to start a business, and I had just a little bit of money, and I knew then, like today, startup businesses invariably 60+% of startup businesses fail in the first year because people underestimate the amount of money they need and the time it takes to realize a return on their limited resources. So I knew I needed to do this quickly. So first of all, I needed a name because I needed to make business cards, and I needed to introduce myself to possible suppliers and possible customers. And in those days, there wasn't Google, and I didn't have the time to make up a name. So I went with my own, knowing I could probably get that registered, and it would make my mother happy. So I registered Kenneth Cole, Inc., and I went to Italy knowing I had a better chance of getting credit from an Italian shoe factory that needed business than from an American bank that didn't. I designed a cool line of ladies' shoes, came back, and at that time in the shoe industry, there was pretty much two alternatives. You could take a room at the Hilton Hotel. You're one of about 1,100 companies, 30 floors, 30 some odd companies per floor, and you present your offering, and then the buyers walk all the floors, and they determine in their infinite wisdom whose product is the most worthy. Or you take a fancy showroom or office within a 2-block radius at Hilton Hotel. I neither had the money or the time for either, actually. So I called a friend of mine in the trucking business, and I said, if I could figure out how to park one of your 40-foot trailers across the street from the Hilton Hotel on the corner of 6th Avenue and 56th Street, will you lend it to me? And he said, sure, jerk. This is New York. You can't park a bicycle for 10 minutes, let alone a truck for 3 days. If I can figure it out, will you lend it to me? And he says, if you can figure it out, I'll help you decorate it. So I called the mayor's office. It was Mayor Koch at the time. And I said, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, how does one get permission to park a 40-foot trailer on the corner of 6th Avenue and 56th Street? And the answer is, son, they don't. We give permission only under two circumstances: if you are a utility company servicing our streets, AT&T or Con Ed, or if you are a production company shooting a full-length motion picture, because we were going through an I Love New York campaign then and probably ever since. So I said, thank you, Mr. Mayor, hung up the phone, and that afternoon I went to a stationery store, changed my letterhead from Kenneth Cole, Inc. to Kenneth Cole Productions, Inc. I filed, this is a true story, I filed for a permit the following morning with the mayor's office for permission to shoot a full-length motion picture called The Birth of a Shoe Company. I opened for business the following week, December 2nd, with 2 New York policemen as my doorman, compliments to Mayor Koch. I had Kligoiks, I had stanchions, I had a director. Sometimes it was filming his camera, sometimes there wasn't. And I saw every cool buyer in New York, and the more important they were, the longer I made them wait. And I sold 40,000 pairs of shoes in 2.5 days. And the company to this day is still called Kenneth Cole Productions. We were traded on the New York Stock Exchange for 20 years. The symbol was KCP. And I tell that story because it continues to remind me and our associates the importance of resourcefulness and problem solving, and that the best solution is rarely the most expensive, it's almost always the most creative. So the business grew, was very demanding, required infinite compromises, and it was very hard to ask your associates to give as much of themselves as you know you need to, and you guys are going to have to make some very tough decisions as you navigate your journeys, and you're going to have to prioritize, and at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to do everything you want to do when you want to do it, and you're going to have to make a commitment. At the end of the day, something's going to fall in the process. So we're focused on building a fashion company. Now I'm saying to myself, how important is what I'm doing? Is this even relevant? Or is it trivially as relevant, or is there some meaning in it? And I came and I argued both cases with myself. I'm very good at that. And I came away with the conclusion that it's both. It's the most powerful tool that we all have. Every day we wake up and we decide how we're going to look that day, unedited, on our own terms, and we introduce ourselves to the world. And most of the people you encounter on any given day don't get to know any more about you than how you choose to present yourself. And it's very powerful. And I have some people say, well, Ken, I'm not really a fashion guy. And I said, that's okay too, but just know that's the message you're sending, and maybe as strong a message as otherwise. So, but on the other hand, if you're sick and you can't feed your family, fashion is has hardly any relevance. And I also remind myself and my associates that nobody needs what we sell. And if every shoe store in America closed its doors tomorrow at 12 o'clock, hardly an American would go barefoot for 14 years. And there's not a single woman that needs another pair of black shoes, or a man a white shirt, or torn jeans, maybe in your case. So my job is to make it important, make you think it, make you glad you thought it, make you think it again. But at the end of the day, how do we make it relevant? How do we make what we do meaningful? And that's kind of how do we create a sense of difference and a sense of purpose? And that's something that I've pondered my entire career. In 1985, as Brianna just told you briefly, I was in business a couple years, and I had a little bit of marketing dollars, and I wanted to invest it in some way to connect in a meaningful way with our customers. So what was happening in 1985 is there was this pervasive consciousness that we hadn't seen in this country since the 60s. And everybody was up in arms and wanting to connect themselves to these various initiatives called Live Aid, World Aid, Hands Across America, We Are the World. All these different industries were joining forces to speak about these very traumatic global realities. But it was fascinating to me because nobody was talking about the biggest global reality, which was happening right here at home, and that was AIDS. And nobody spoke about AIDS in the 80s because if you did, you were presumed to be at risk. Ronald Reagan, President of the United States, didn't mention the word AIDS publicly until 1987, until 40,000 people had already died. And to be at risk meant you were either gay, you were HIV, you were an intravenous drug user, or you were Haitian. Now, I was a single male designer, so I knew everybody would just assume that I was Haitian. But because I wasn't part of one of those at-risk groups, maybe is why I was comfortable doing what I did. And we launched a campaign to talk about the fact that nobody's speaking about AIDS. And it was a photograph initially with Annie Leibovitz, and we got all these wonderful fashion models to agree to be part of it. And it was a picture of these beautiful women, some of the biggest iconic fashion models in our industry at the time, and beautiful children. Because everybody loves beautiful women, and we love all children. We don't learn to hate them until they get older, have opinions, and want us to pay for their college educations. But interestingly, too, as my journey progressed, I joined the board of AMFAR, which was the most important AIDS research organization in the country at the time. And I've since became its chairman, as you heard, in '04, and AMFAR has gone on to, we at AMFAR have gone on to have a profound impact on the lives of millions of people infected with HIV. And many of the drugs that are keeping millions of people alive have roots in AMFAR funding. Mother-to-child transmission has roots in AMFAR funding. And a lot of that also, you should know, has deep roots in Emory's commitment to the cause as well, too. And several of our administrators at AMFAR came through the Emory system here. And Emory continues to have a powerful impact on global health and all infectious diseases, as I know you and President Wagner just spoke about Ebola as well. So this changed me. It changed the company, changed the brand, and it changed me in a very profound way forever. And as I like to say, I found a voice which has helped guide my journey. And I have ever since looked for every opportunity to speak about not just what's on people's bodies, what's on their minds, not just what they stand in, what they stand for, and to encourage all that if they can't change and have an impact on the world individually, they can at least be an accessory. But I do believe that all need to find a voice, and the world is changing today at such unfathomable speed. Business is being redefined, the value equation is being recalibrated right before your eyes. Somebody asked me recently, an editor, where I thought we would all be in 5 years. And my answer was that was an irrelevant question. And they kind of in a cute way said, well, why do you think this is an irrelevant question? I said, because some of the biggest companies in the world today didn't exist 5 years ago. In fact, the largest taxi company in the world, which incidentally doesn't own a car, is called Uber. The most popular media company in the world, which existed but has transformed, doesn't create any content. It's called Facebook. The most valuable retailer in the world hardly existed, didn't in this hemisphere. It's called Alibaba. And the largest accommodation provider in the world doesn't own any real estate, and they didn't exist, called Airbnb. So the world is another world, changing at such unfathomable speeds. And what we try to do in our company today, which is kind of counterintuitive if you studied business, is to build a platform that responds positively, enthusiastically to opportunities and to change, and not to be too vested in any one commitment in any one path. Social media has changed the world. And it's happened virtually overnight, and I know you guys all know this. So or few knew, in fact, some of this didn't even exist, knew 5 years ago about pinning and posting and gramming and selfies and texting, yes, but sexting, no. But it's fascinating. So and it enables you, there's this new global platform to connect with people everywhere. Content today is ubiquitous. A enlightened education today is available to everybody, not just those lucky to go to Emory. And you can go to iTunes U, and you can go online, and you can have access to some of the greatest minds and the most inspiring thinkers, and anybody everywhere can have access. But what you have here is you have curated access, you have community, which is powerful. And hopefully what I think you have here is something greater, which I'm going to talk about in my advice, which I'll burden you with shortly. But what's interesting is that, so everything is ubiquitous today. Content essentially is ubiquitous. Design is ubiquitous. So, but what isn't is a brand. And a brand is all-defining, and it tells the world who you are and what you stand for. And what's interesting to me, fascinating to me today, is my job used to be to tell my story to anybody that would listen, and hopefully get you to connect and get us to align ourselves together. But today I've come to realize that everybody is their own brand. And every day you guys wake up in the morning and you curate your brand on your Facebook page, on your Instagram feed, on your Snapchat feed. Is that a feed? And you also, people curate their audiences. It's not, they don't just curate content. They decide who they're going to have access to who they are and what they want to say to whom. So that is all defining, that is transformative. And communities are connecting with communities. Movements are happening overnight, simultaneously. And you are all, in effect, part of the media. Everybody today has a voice. Everybody today can find an audience. The question is, do we know how to harness that? Do we know how to use that? For years, what I did was in the form of a monologue. Today, it is all a dialogue. It is people tell us what they want. My job is to give it to them, but maybe not how they expect it. And people are not quiet, and they've learned how to be heard. I remember once reading that canaries are born with a physiological ability to sing beautiful songs, but without a mentor of some kind, in this case another canary, to show them how to use that God-given gift, they will likely grow up never singing at all. So clearly we have come far, and so many have found their voices, and so many haven't. We are living in a time of extraordinary inequality with profound resentment, and that's what we're watching and witnessing every night on the news. The richest 1% of this country earn more than the lowest 90%. Hashtag wage gap. Same-sex couples, people who love each other, who want to define their relationships with each other, regardless of their sex, gender, can only do it in about half the states in this country. And there is pizza available in Indiana. Hashtag marriage equality. Women still only make 78 cents on the dollar to what men make. I was going to suggest that men in our company agree to take 22% less in order to, but I didn't go there. Hashtag gender equality. Americans have 5 times the rate of incarceration than any other developed country in the world. Hashtag prison reform. The highest rate of teenage pregnancy in the industrial world is here, believe it or not, in the United States. Hashtag teen mom. So, there is a presidential campaign lurking that will focus on the national debt, probably the budget deficit, and personal emails. They likely will not dig very far into income, race, gender, inequality, mass incarceration, or poverty. But you guys, interestingly, many of you for the first time are going to be offered a chance to join the discussion this election day. So Americans, by the way, also have the lowest turnout of just about all true democracies in the world. And millennials, though, incidentally, represent 1/3 of the electorate and only 19% of the vote. So to that I suggest hashtag show up or hashtag shut up. So some unsolicited advice that I have been afforded to offer you because I am your Class Day speaker, and to those of you that are still awake can benefit from it. So, we used to work years ago, hopefully to get into a good school, then to make a lot of money, then to get a good job, then to make a lot of money so that one day we could give back to the community. And, but we've learned that that process doesn't need to happen that way. And that in fact, if you can make being involved in the community part of the journey, the destination is significantly more rewarding, culturally, spiritually, and believe it or not, financially. But though that's not necessarily why you should do it. We had a program here that Brianna referred to at Emory. It was 12 years ago we were speaking about that, on community building and social change. And the goal was, how do we find those enlightened and inspiring young people, leaders, our future leaders, how do we empower them with the resources to become our change agents, our agents of change, and our builders of community? We know how to build buildings, we know where to go. We hire architects, we hire builders, but how do we build communities? How do we take down walls, build bridges? You guys have the ability to do that. And I suggest that you listen, you collaborate, you commit to making a difference, and you will. My generation blew it, and I believe you and yours can fix it. And if you're not, you can't alone be the solution, you can be an accessory. You're taught to draw within the lines. Opportunities usually exist outside of those lines. In corporate America, we often ask our associates to sit in cubicles, but we ask them to think outside the box. Every day I look in my closet, as I said, and I say to myself, what do I wish was here, and I go to work and make it. Opportunities exist, not always in the most obvious places. So many of you feel, well, you're now done with school, and some of you are, but hopefully you've come to realize that now is when the learning first begins. What you will need to succeed, I assure you, for the most of you, you haven't learned yet. And the greatest lesson you can learn is the need to keep learning. And learning is even more important than earning, especially at this point in your careers. And you could be on the right track, but if you're not moving forward, you'll still get hit by the next train. So I know many of you are anxious about your next chapters and your careers. And there's probably a lot of anxiety, and there's probably been a lot of resulting substance abuse and psychoanalysis. But I've got good news for you, and you can relax. The good news is that it's really not that important, your next job. Apparently, the average American I read will change jobs 9.2 times in the next 16 years. A job is not who you are. A job needs to be a step in enabling you to be what you want to be. And it needs to be a tool to allow you to get where you want to go, a means to an end. I am a designer, yes, but as you also heard, or as I say on my Instagram page, I'm a frustrated activist, an aspiring humanitarian, I'm a father, and I am maybe the hardest of all an Emory alumni. Not so hard. We're living in a world with limitless content, and the key is curation, as I said. I had, about 10 years ago, a famous, well-known, celebrated fashion photographer named Richard Avedon said to me, Ken, don't ever allow yourself to be photographed in an undignified way by others or your selfies. He didn't say that because we didn't have selfies then. So my advice to you is on graduation weekend, as you enjoy your graduation parties and every other party from now on, that on Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, and on graduatesgonewild.com, that these photographs will likely reappear in the regrettable future. So I suggest that you have all the fun you want, but withhold the evidence. So in closing, this is an extraordinary time in history. If you believe your role on this planet is to make a difference, not just in your own, but in other people's lives, there may never be a better chance than now. If you commit yourselves to becoming community builders and you commit to the path of difference making, you will be overwhelmed with the opportunities to drive profound, meaningful, and sustainable social change. And like the canary that has the power of song within it, so graduates, it is time for you to identify your God-given gifts, find your voice, and help others find theirs. My final tip is in the form of a favorite anecdote as well. It's a story of an old gentleman who's driving down I-75 one night. And he gets a call from his hysterical wife who says, "Honey, you better get home fast. I just heard that there is a lunatic on the same road that you're on, driving in the wrong direction." He paused and thought for a second, not wanting to alarm her unnecessarily. And finally he said, "Darling, it's worse than that. There are hundreds of them." So first you should know that for much of my journey I have felt a little bit like that lunatic. And so might you. So the lesson here, graduates, is that even if you find yourself going against traffic, you may still be heading in the right direction. So don't be deterred, fasten your seatbelt, and dress appropriately. Thank you.